Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. This session is fitting today because you will hear that Nat and I are at the end of sinus colds. You'll hear the congestion, so we're feeling a bit of a mess. But we want to chat about the world is a bit of a mess, but here's how to function anyway. And I want to share a few things this weekend that happened that kind of tipped me over the edge, which is ironic because I've become numb to every crisis that's unfolding right in front of me every day. But I do think that's an important distinction and why. But Nat, any thoughts on what's happening with you these days in the world?
Well, I was hoping that I would sound really like one of those glamorous, throaty, super celebrity. I don't think so. I think I'm still at the you sound like a very sick person. I don't feel that sick, but I'm definitely operating at about 80%. So bear with if the brain starts fogging over. Yeah, I mean, my TV has decided that this time of all times is the perfect time to switch to CNN being the default when you turn it on. It used to just be like a nice, pretty scenery picture. And now we're straight into whatever's happening in the world, and it's usually bad. So that has been a really interesting experiment in what happens when you sort of run on autopilot. I left it on this morning and I am definitely turning it off. I try and listen to my news through breakfast TV, which is like curated happy news. And that's not to say I don't stay in touch. Like I do know what's happening in the world, but I really try and limit it to like I understand what's happening, but when I can't do anything about it, just like be aware of it, but don't like be obsessed with it. That's like my approach. Um, I also have been spending the last few weeks talking about how amazing it is that Wellington's turning a corner. We've been in a bit of a slump for the last probably couple of years. Anyone who doesn't know much about Wellington, we are in an earthquake area. So we had some pretty big earthquakes, maybe a decade ago. And since then, there's been a lot of buildings that have just been permanently shut down. There's been little investment in like cool stuff and more in just earthquake strengthening. We're a government town, lots of redundancies. But I feel like 2026 is turning a corner. There's some really cool new stuff happening. Everyone's feeling like really motivated. And then everyone's like, yeah, but now we're running out of petrol. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's like the start of COVID. Like you're hearing all these words like, it's like 2020 again, which is not that long ago where we're starting to talk about what happens at crisis level 1, 2, and 3. And it's just like, oh wow, we're just gonna do that again?
It's funny that you're like feeling hope because in my peer group, there's half of us, there are half of them that are feeling hope and half of us that are feeling really sad about our little city that's fumbling at the moment. And I say that because I love being out in the ocean and we've had basically our entire septic system in Wellington be leaking into the ocean. So it's an unsafe place to swim. And a summer of no surfing is a little bit distressing and disappointing, I should say, due to the lack of investment in infrastructure. And who knows? I go on. So that's been a little bit disappointing. And then on top of that, I saw a stat. This is one of the things that happened to me on the weekend that just hurt my heart. And I heard a stat that our economic influx of people, what is it called? Like our net migration into Wellington is 800 people in the next 5 years. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, we own
That's
assets
the
in a
estimated.
city.
That's the estimated amount.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, this is so you can see where Nat and my brains live, but I'm like, oh my gosh, panic stations, 800 people. We're never going to be able to leave this city. Anyway, I digress. That was one of the things that I thought, oh dear, signs are not showing. The second thing is, yes, we have got a looming fuel crisis. And I saw a headline yesterday in the New York Times that said, this feels like March 2020. And I'd agree with that. We know something's coming. We've been in the unknown before. It just feels like the calm before the storm. That's the second thing. The third thing that has like really rocked me is my son's friend is apparently depressed and he's put out hundreds of job applications. He's living on his own in the city. He's really struggling. He's probably spending far too much time online, which we know is really unhealthy. And he's alone and sad. And I'm like, oh gosh, so I'm just going to pull this kid into my house and kind of care for him. And I don't know, they hit really close to home. Whereas I think it's important that to also note that the world seems to be on fire. A bunch of powerful men, which is like my worst, this is like my kryptonite, powerful men in power making really bad decisions, and I just like, "Ah." But I've become, almost immune to every single time I turn on the TV, like, it's just like nothing affects me anymore, and they call this psychic numbing, is that the more people are suffering, the less we feel because we kind of adjust to a new normal, which is actually insane.
Yeah, it's that oh, do you remember back in the day there was famine in, various countries in Africa, and back then everyone just assumed Africa was one country, and the ads would say, "The problem's too big, what can I do?" And they were really trying to point to that feeling of, like, it just felt so insurmountable when there were these millions of people starving in the world, and you're so far away, and yeah, so charities really kind of understood that psychic numbing philosophy, well, that how we are psychically numbed and that leads to inaction. I think and I think we've talked about this a bit before, that you've got the big global stuff that you do get numb to, and then it kind of comes to your doorstep and you're not numb to. And I think that's maybe something, a philosophy, or maybe it's in our wiring to stop us imploding, of we actually have to focus on what's in front of us and the stuff we can control. And if we all do that, then actually we might have a little bit of an impact. And I think when you talk about this poor boy, and I was thinking, well, if you're not taking him into your home, I will. um, but we both watched the Louis Theroux documentary as well on the manosphere. And if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend. If you've seen little snippets on Instagram, it'll be all the like stuff that gets the eyeballs on Instagram. But I thought it was a really thoughtful documentary on some of the wider systemic issues. And we've all heard about loneliness epidemics, we've all heard about a lot of stuff. And I felt like it really very thoughtfully, and I would say as respectfully as you can, showcase the motivations behind this group of people who have, in many ways, it had the opposite reaction to this person you're speaking about, but under the same situations, feeling alone, feeling like hopeless about finding a job, feeling like the world is going to custard. And some people go to feeling really sad and depressed, and others have sort of found this way of almost faking it till they make it, in terms of nothing matters. I'm just all about money, and kind of nihilistic. And it's kind of interesting that the way I interpreted that documentary is it's the same factors, and it's the sense of hopelessness. And like they said in the Manosphere documentary, fathers absent or abusive, a world which there is less economic opportunities than there were for everyone. It's just that women probably feel it less because we had none, and now we're getting some. So there's a lot of big factors, and they play out in micro levels all day, every day.
It's interesting when you said that, I was reminded of a new term that's come out recently, and it's called collective narcissism. And this is, I just found an article that's like the destruction of reality, reason, and society. And I think in a world where we increasingly lack control of, it could be the way careers used to unfold and the way we used to be able to provide for families and the lack of toxic kind of behavior online and all of this stuff. We are now in a world that is just so uncertain and so noisy that there's apparently this rise of collective narcissism where masses of society are making really destructive decisions.
Yeah. Do you know, it's interesting though? I feel like, and this is probably where optimism and pessimism come in. And I don't think I'm an optimist. I think I'm a realist, but I skew towards optimism. Of human nature has always been and will always be to find a way through. And like, even do you remember that movie Lord of the Flies? And it was about, the kids. Yeah, that's like completely the opposite of what actually happens when people end up in those situations. And there have been situations like that. And what actually tends to happen is people come together and they work together and they figure out how to come through a really, really tough thing together. So I think we're seeing sometimes the worst instincts of humans, and it can feel like it's everyone, but it's actually the 2% that are very loud, and that everyone else is actually, and even if you're talking about like US politics or something that feels really divisive, I reckon if you polled most people have the similar fundamental values. If they think it's a different way of getting there, that's fine. But we let the loud voices sway how we feel about how badly the world is going. And yes, there are some powerful loud voices, but over time, I don't know. There's never been a situation where evil prevails or where humans give up. And so I kind of just feel like we will muddle our way through this the way we always have.
Hopeful, hopeful, hopeful. Thank you. That's super encouraging. Let's bring it
She's
individual
like,
to our
don't believe a word of it.
I'm gonna hang on to it. No, it is, I do in a way, I my brain can compute that because I have to believe that those in positions of power and influence, sanity will prevail, and the next term or in the future, sanity will prevail. So, I have to believe that because, hope. But I do think that our amygdala, I was obviously doing a bit of research, was not built for this 24/7 news cycle, like you said, the CNN. Like, we were not built for crises after crises after crises that play out right in front of us, in our feeds, in front of our eyes all the time. And as a result, it is exhausting and tiring. And as a result, anxiety goes up. It's hard to concentrate, stay motivated, and feel safe, actually, especially, not knowing if we're going to have fuel tomorrow and what that even means. Like, it's like the COVID, something's happening, but what does it even mean? And AI, let's add that onto the mix as well, and, like, will the next generation even be able to work? I did see last doom scrolly thing was I saw something yesterday that talked about the weavers, which were completely disrupted, when the loom came into play and, fabric was mass produced and traded. There was an entire sector of people and working people that were put out of work, like, in one fell swoop, and she was likening that to white collar jobs and AI. She's like, the weavers were no different. They had 4-day work weeks and flexible work, and they could come and go as they pleased, and they held an immense amount of power. And yet, here we are, that entire, ti and I'm like, "Okay." ah."
But then you think about that even when you think about typists and secretaries, that whole industry fell apart. Taxi industry fell apart, motel industry fell apart, all of these industries fall apart. And every single time they fall apart, it's almost like, okay, here's how I put it. When you look at Simone Biles at the Olympics doing her gymnastics, you look at her and you go, there is absolutely no way humans could ever push the limits more than that because this is the peak of human potential. And then you go back 10 years and we thought the same then, and we thought the same then 20 years before. We think it was sprinting. You're like looking at these people run like 9-second 100 meters going, there is no way we can beat that. And yet we do. And I think every time one of these industries is disrupted, we are basing our future focus on what we know to be true now. And what it actually takes is imagining a whole world that is fundamentally different, which is very hard for humans to do. We're not designed for that, most of us. So I do feel like looking back is a nice way to look forward and just go, in the past, every time we've hit one of these situations, things have changed and evolved, and we've ended up in a future that we couldn't imagine. I just feel like, yeah,
I love it. I to think this is a really appropriate time to go in spectrum of responses because you've described your response quite well a couple times, and it's like an informed, optimist in a way I might combine. Like, you are like, "I'm informed, but I have to stay somewhat detached, but I am an optimist that I will be fine." So, there's, like, this kind of informed yet detached optimist. Like, you have to function, you have to believe that, humans will prevail, and we have the ability and the tools and the community and the ability to collaborate so that everything will be okay. So I do love that. There is the checker, which I've caught myself at the start of. I recall the Israel-Palestine conflict. I was the checker. I refreshed the newsfeed constantly. I could not switch off. I found every podcast available. I probably did the same in Trump term one. I have been better. I've had to be better, like, honestly, like, I can't be the checker anymore. I cannot refresh the news anymore. I've started to limit, anyway, never mind. So there's the checker. Then there's the avoider. The head in the sand, everything fine. I do think of a
I
gorgeous
like
woman
Tyler
at
when I had to be like, "You do know they were invaded Iran, right?" And she's like, "What?"
the
No, she's
avoider,
not an
head in the
avoider. She's
sand.
probably more of a detached optimist than me. She's like, "What am I gonna do about them invading Iran?" Like,
Yes, okay. Okay, well, there is an avoider where it's like, "Everything is fine." And then there's the paralyzed. They know something's wrong, but, like, just are totally, total paralysis to act on anything, just stuck, that freeze symptom, which again is very common with the amygdala. Am I missing any? Did I any that you thought that others might resonate with?
the other one I've noticed is the, what is it? Is it the, evangelist, I'm gonna call it that, and that's the people you see, and I feel like I've been, exposed to a few of these on Instagram or at a barbecue or wherever, where they're like, "But Gaza, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you sharing more?" And they get a sense of control from sharing links and talking about it and being, like, on that team of I'm doing something, and my challenge is always, like, I am up for doing something. Like, you tell me what's gonna have an impact, and I will be on that first bus there. But I do think awareness and pressure does do something when, especially because 'cause we're showing governments what we care about, but I feel like that kind of really confrontational style of do more without really being clear on what to do is, I find that one quite like, it is obviously solving a sense of lack of control for someone, and I do think there's a bunch of people who jump to that mode, like yeah, yeah. Have you seen anyone in that position?
Oh, 100%, of course, 'cause and I do relate to it as well. In my 20s, I was probably more that person, yeah, 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 and I think you get, older, wiser, tireder, who knows, but, I do think what I do like is when campaigns are organized, and when I think about campaigns that are organized, I think of crises such as the Christchurch mosque shooting, the Christchurch earthquake. I mean, how ironic, 2 horrific things in that city. But what I mean by organized is there was a collective response in that here are 3 things you can do, and I remember that organizations united around, the Muslim population in New Zealand and donated, and, there are things where it was like step 1, 2, 3, and you could do one of those steps and still feel a part of the solution, and I just recall those times of being calm, collectiveness, like you said, humans coming together, and it being very clear what we could do. And I just wonder in a world of total uncertainty, maybe we just don't have the collective, like, "Here's the smartest things to do." I don't
Yeah,
know.
and often there is one, like, and I've noticed more and more so when some of these big events happen, there are shared lists through, respected news media of, here are the organizations that are on the ground, donate to one of these, and, like, obviously do that. Um, if there is, because I feel like even things like petitions.com or whatever it is, now there's, like, a million petitions for everything, and I'm like, "I think we need to go back to just having one that we all sign rather than, like, 100 that have 10 signatures." So I do, and there's a whole bigger argument as well with nonprofits and how everyone starts their own versus just supporting one and, like, having a centralization. But I feel like those spectrum of responses, we probably, like the drama triangle, jump through them a bit, and you can find yourself easily in one and then have to sort of work through to get to one that's slightly healthier for each of us because it is so easy, and, like, I feel like that even now with this, like it will be interesting to see in, like, 2 months' time, but this pending oil crisis, and you're like, "Okay, so we may end up with no oil," and I'm not someone who's like, "Oh, well, the government will sort it," because, I don't think that I'm sort of a capitalist on that front, like, I don't think that's a good thing. I'm also not someone who's racing out to fill my car up because I'm like, I'll probably be the first person to just stop driving. We're in a privileged position to stop driving for a while. But yeah, it is sort of like, how do you sort of work through each one of those responses to get to one that you can kind of live with. And maybe this is also, in a weird way, a way to practice the skills that we need at work these days, which is being kind of somewhat uncomfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. Like, all of these things are ambiguous and they're uncertain and there's no clear outcome and there's a lot of hard things and starting to like really grapple with how do you sit in that and take control where you can and like face the harsh facts head on but have a plan or have a idea of how it turns out well is something that works out really nicely when it comes to redundancies and restructures and business pivots and all of that stuff we're facing these days as well.
Absolutely, and where we can control to control. So let's just deep dive into that a little bit and maybe just give some tips that have worked for us. And I like how you talked about this kind of sphere of control, and there's so much ambiguity, and things do happen to us. But where in that environment, situation, where can you actually affect? What are the things that you can control? Just start there. So that's the first thing I wanna kinda say is just a bit of a sphere of control reset and just ask yourself, "What's the smallest step I can take to take back control of whatever the situation is going on around me?"
And that could be something as simple as, like, going out for a walk or turning the TV off or putting a time box on scrolling, because if you are in a state of panic, you are not being helpful to anyone. Like, that's the reality. And what is it? Like, I've been watching The Newsreader, which is a really cool Australian show in the '80s, but it also really highlights, like, bad news is very good for news organizations. Like, they actually love bad news because eyeballs turn to them. There's people who are glued to, like, figuring it out, or stuck in that state of panic, and there are a lot of arguments that, news has led to people being more easily controlled, because when you have a population that lives in fear, they're looking for a solution. So, like, really trying to take yourself out of that fear mode is a really good place to start when you are thinking about what you can control.
I think you've described boundaries as well, like boundaries that actually work for us and our families and our friends. And if that is limiting the scrolling, doom scrolling, online, podcast, whatever it is, that's actually not taking us forward or get it or put it, if we're in a spiral, it's time to pull out the boundaries, which feels like a very healthy response.
Yeah, and I think that probably covers too, how we communicate with our friends. Like, I feel like that kind of cancellation, not cancellation of meetings, but or like ghosting, but the idea of canceling bad people rose probably, what was it, like 10, 20 years ago, as a result of really powerful people getting away with really terrible things. And one of the things that normal people could control is no longer supporting them. So there was a case of a couple of musicians who had abused their wives and girlfriends, and people stopped listening to their music. So that used to be a tool that was a control tool, but now it's become a weaponized tool where anyone disagree with, they get cancelled for saying or doing anything. And I actually feel like the boundaries thing we need to all practice now is being able to debate ideas and to disagree with each other politely and considerately, and not assuming that someone who thinks or votes differently than you is bad, because that divisiveness is what leads to bad things happening. Whereas if we can relearn how to disagree and get along and have healthy debates, or keep it to the topic, not making it personal, I actually think the rest of us will be much better at coming together and being sort of a united front and able to tackle these things together, rather than sort of picking our tribes and ending up with, leaders who we don't really like.
I don't disagree with anything you've just said. So, fabulous. I'll highlight that. So fully support that. Like going down any red pill, blue pill is not good for anyone really. And we actually need diverse perspectives and healthy debate.
I'm currently
I
on
just
red pills, just by the way. A whole pack of red pills. Is that the bad one
Okay.
or the good one?
That's I think the red pill is oh my gosh, I can't remember. It was in the manosphere. I can't
I've been
remember.
red pilled
I think it was red
multiple
pills.
times.
Yeah, they're like, "Take the red pill." I think it is. Look, I'd just like to end on anxiety versus useful action, and this is something that can apply to all sorts of scenarios, is that we will feel things. I think it's very normal to feel things when we're facing so much change, ambiguity, and frankly, crisis. And, there's a point at which we have to breathe, we have to stretch, we have to laugh, we have to, get out of our heads and out of anxiety and take useful action. We're huge fans of small steps, and so when confronted with uncertainty around AI, get curious about AI, learn a little bit more about it, use it, encourage the next generation to get really curious about that. When we're unsure of, yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts around other small actions that we can take instead of sitting in anxiety?
Sitting and stewing. This, and I actually need to look into this because I've heard 2 different reasons for this, but the origin of self-care either came from, or it could have been sort of a combination of both, the Black Civil Rights Movement, back in the '60s, '50s, '60s, '70s, and the AIDS, campaign for all the people who had, been very, very much, ignored and absolutely criminally negligent health industry around them. And so those groups both recognized that you had to campaign hard all day, But in order to protect yourself, you had to practice self-care, which sometimes meant having a good time, going out, partying, having fun, laughing with your friends to replenish. And so I like I say, I want to dig into this more and find out exactly the background. But I really love it as a philosophy that sometimes when really bad things are happening and we're feeling stressed, it feels wrong to have a good time, and it feels like we should be serious and stressed and anxious the whole time. But actually, that's the exact opposite thing. Yes, you can be, and time box it and really take like Kristen shared those actions of what can I do to contribute? What can I help with? What can I do to make sure that I'm not overstressing myself? But actually pause sometimes and just remember we are alive in this world. It is ultimately this beautiful Gaia we live in, and look after yourself and have a little bit of fun because it's not hurting anyone for you to have a bit of fun and to be happy even when times are
Oh,
tough.
well said, well said. Thank you for your,
The red pills, Kristen, it's the red pills.
no, it is a hopeful message in what can be, uncertain times. So please do reach out if you're feeling like you wanna chat to someone. We've got an incredibly supportive community of almost 800 women who are going to be in your corner. If you are feeling a little bit alone, just reach out to hello@powersuit.com and we'll get you all set up. We can work in your budget too. So, be
That's
well,
like, did you
everyone.
notice that just tangent last week? Someone came up to us and she was like, "We need more in-person meetups." We have in-person Powersuit meetups, by the way, now, and they are the best because everyone's joined Powersuit, open to meeting people, open to, walking in, being friendly, all of the stuff that we're normally scared about. And she was just like, there was just something so nice about walking into a cafe, meeting up with, I don't know, however many, 20, 40 other Powersuiters. And she was just like, it was just such a buzz to just know I was gonna be welcomed, I was gonna be accepted, I was gonna meet great people, and a few other people have said that too, that they're like, "Gosh, power students are interesting," and we're like, "Yeah, that's who we attract." But it is if you are feeling that like, "Ugh," there are places you can go, and it's not just power suit, but there are places you can go that you will find pockets of amazing people who are there to support you, who are there to have a nice chat, who are happy to talk through the things that are, like, top of mind because we all have them and it can help. So go find those people.
Hello@powersuit.com, everyone. Reach out if you are in need of a bit of support, and we got your back. And we will catch everyone next time. Bye for now.